Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshunamilitan Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam Pravajantam Hanupeta Apeta Krityam Rapayano Verha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tanmaitaya Taravo Binedus Tam Sarvabhutam Hridayam Munimanatosmi Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasvatam Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Bhaktya Vihina Parada Lakshay Kiptashtakamari Tarangamadye Kripa Maitram Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charanada Vindam Tave Vasmi Najivami Tvayavina Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayanam Charanandike Vancha Kalpa Tarubhascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, so we continue by first offering our most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of our beloved Gurus, unto Sri Guru Pada Padma Nityalita Bhavishta. Om Vishnu Padasto Tarsat Sri Srimad Abhaya Charnaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and unto Sri Guru Pada Padma Nityalita Bhavishta. Om Vishnu Padasto Tarsat Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Raj, under our exalted Rupanuga Guru Varga, and all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. So now we have heard so much about the transformation of Jagai and Madhai by the mercy of Sri Nityananda Prabhu and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And now they're going to offer prayers, right? They are at the house of Mahaprabhu in the midst of his most confidential associates, most dear associates, who have all now embraced Jagai and Madhai as one of their own. So important to understand that when bhakti enters into one's life, then everything else is insignificant. Now, of course, this concept is oftentimes misused. It doesn't, in one sense, negate the fact that we don't condone bad behavior, right? By no means. But if one has become a purified Vaishnava, then all those inclinations, all those habits, everything, that has gone away, right? But of course, nowadays, a lot of people misuse that and call themselves Vaishnavas and want to be excused for bad behavior. You can't do that. You can't do that. But these are, this is the topmost example. It's an extraordinary example, but not something to be cheaply imitated. So, the two, Jagai and Madhai, then began to offer prayers that were heard by Sri Gaur Sundar and other associates. Now, this verse is very important. Shuddha Sarasvati Dui Janada Jivaya Vasila Chaitanya Chandra Prabhupada Agyaya. By the order of Lord Chaitanya Chandra, Shuddha Sarasvati, the goddess of transcendental knowledge, appeared on the tongues of those two. Now listen to this purport by Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Prabhupada. The phrase Shuddha Sarasvati refers to the appearance of the personification of service in the Vidvadruti of the living entity's object of speech. Vidha Sarasvati, the goddess of mixed or contaminated knowledge, creates a difference between the words of the Pushkarasadi, Shanki, Karoshti, and Brahmi languages, and the objects indicated by those words. So, living entities who desire to become the husband of Sarasvati attempt to worship Sarasvati Devi with material ingredients. But they cannot realize that Narayan is the husband of Shuddha Saraswati. Therefore, their attempts to become the husband of Vidha Saraswati result in their becoming followers of Ravana. Okay, so once again, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Prabhupada is addressing contemporary misconceptions that pervaded students or so-called practitioners of Vedic culture, and the worship of Sarasvati. When he says Vidha Sarasvati, she's an expansion of Shuddha Saraswati, just like there is a Vidha Lakshmi, right, that people worship for material prosperity. Right? So there's also a Vidha Saraswati that people worship for accomplishment in affairs of material knowledge. But these come, and there's also a form of Bhakti Devi like that as well. When people are practicing Varnashram and are influenced, and their practice is predominated by the motives of Karmakanda, they're also performing the functions of bhakti, but their purpose and their goal are material. And so Bhakti Devi expands herself into a special form to grant these to those worshippers, but they're not getting the benefit of the eternal Shuddha Bhakti. Right? And this is described by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Madhurya Kadambini. So here, with Jagai and Madhai, Shuddha Saraswati appears by the desire of Mahaprabhu. Right? And again, he brings up this term Vidvad Rudhi. Right? The phrase Shuddha Saraswati refers to the appearance of the personification of service in the Vidvadrudhi of the living entity's object of speech. In other words, according to the definition understood by transcendental personalities, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Prabhupada uses this word Vidvadrudhi over and over and over again, because he's clearly separating the practice, the understanding, the intentions of those aspiring for pure bhakti from those who are trying to use bhakti for material purposes, right? And he calls those worshippers of Saraswati Devi who are worshiping her for material purposes followers of Ravana. Why? Because Ravana also wanted to claim the wife of Lord Ram, Sita Devi, for his own, right? He had heard from his sister about the beauty of Sita. His sister had tried to kill Sita in order to claim Lord Ram. What a family, right? One's trying to kill the Supreme Personality, to kill the Supreme, goddess of fortune, the wife of the Lord, in order to enjoy the Lord independently for herself. And her brother is trying to enjoy the consort of the Lord and kill the Lord so he can enjoy her for himself. So those who are trying to enjoy Saraswati and use her for material purposes, that is the mentality of Ravana, right? That's the mentality of Ravana. So then, Nityananda Chaitanya Prakasha Ekatra Dekilena Duijane Yara Yehi Tattva. Seeing Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya together there, the two could understand their actual identity, Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya. So now they're getting full realization here. Ehi matta stuti kare dui mahashai ye stuti shunile Krishna bhakti labhyak hoya. In this way, the two great personalities began to recite prayers. Anyone who hears these prayers attains devotional service to Krishna. Again, hearing these prayers from transcendental personalities. Now, this has been written by a transcendental personality, commented by a transcendental personality. So we're praying for their blessings. We're not transcendental personalities, but we're hearing with a sense of, even though it's quite meager, a sense of devotion, a sense of urgency, right? And we're wanting to follow in the footsteps. We're the modern Jagai and Madhais. So what are they saying now that they're full of realization? Before they were chasing and disregarding, and now, Jaya Jaya Mahaprabhu, Jaya Vishrambar, Jaya Jaya Nityananda Vishrambaradara. All glories to Mahaprabhu. All glories to Vishrambar. All glories to Nityananda, who is the support of Vishrambar. So that prayer speaks to both Mahaprabhu and Nityananda and to their special transcendental relationship. Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Prabhupada says, Sri Nityananda Prabhu serves Vishrambar in 10 different ways. That is why his name is Vishrambara Dhara. Without taking shelter of the lotus feet of Nityananda, a living entity cannot have any concept of Vishrambar. Right, because Nityananda is who? He's Baladev. He's also Ananta. He's Sankarshan. In these different incarnations, he's also the Lord of Sandhini Shakti, which creates all the objects of service to the Lord. It creates the transcendental Dham, all the elements in the Dham, all the features of the Dham, and all the forms of the devotees in the Dham. And specifically things are mentioned like bed, umbrella, items of worship, but also, in the case of Nityananda, especially fulfilling the purpose and mission of Mahaprabhu by teaching everywhere and by especially teaching and uplifting the devotees and making them eligible to come into the service of Mahaprabhu. Without taking shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Nityananda, a living entity cannot have any concept of Vishrambar. Jaya Jaya Nija Nama Vinoda Acharya Jaya Nityananda Chaitanya Sarvakarya. All glories to the Acharyas who take pleasure in chanting their own names. The Acharyas means Nityananda and Mahaprabhu. All glories to Nityananda, who does everything for the pleasure of Lord Chaitanya. When they say chanting their own names, does that mean they're chanting? Nityananda is not chanting his own name, he's chanting the names of Gora, and Gora is chanting the names of Krishna. Right? Now, so in the purport, Acharyam mam vajaniyan, navamanyeta karachit, namartya buddhya suyeta sarva devamayo guru. This is Krishna speaking. I think this is 11th canto. Yeah. One should know the Acharya as myself and never disrespect him in any way. One should not envy him, thinking him an ordinary man, for he is the representative of all the demigods. I can't remember if that's 11th canto or Padma Purana, but it's famous quote. Then, apani achari dharma jivara shikaya. One should teach religious principles to the living entities by personally following them. So, Sri Gaurasundar, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, and Sri Advaita Prabhu are all Vishnu Tattva. Sri Chaitanya Dev is the most supreme absolute truth. Sri Nityananda Prabhu is the supreme absolute truth, and Sri Advaita Prabhu is the absolute truth. Why is he saying like that? Because Mahaprabhu is the original Swayam Bhagavan. Nityananda Prabhu is his Swayam Prakash, his first expansion, right? Fulfilling so many purposes. And Advaita Prabhu is an expansion of his many other forms, right? All are Vishnu Tattva, but all are representing varying degrees of Vishnu Tattva, right? And both Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu, they are in the mood of servants to Mahaprabhu. So Mahaprabhu is the most supreme absolute truth. Nityananda Prabhu is the supreme absolute truth, non-different. And Advaita Prabhu is also the absolute truth. Right? In the pastimes of Sri Gaura, they enacted and preached pastimes of relishing the holy names by their personal example. Only those whose own behavior is favorable to the teachings of Sri Chaitanya take shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Nityananda in order to become qualified followers of Sri Nityananda. Okay. So only those whose behavior is favorable to the teachings of Sri Chaitanya take shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Nityananda in order to become qualified followers of Sri Nityananda. So you don't become a follower of Nityananda unless you are truly embracing the teachings about Mahaprabhu, not just by mind, but by action as well, right? And that's pretty inclusive, right? He goes on to say, and by that, you don't just automatically become qualified to be a follower of Sri Nityananda. He says, all the activities of Sri Nityananda and Sri Chaitanya were meant to establish the principle of relishing the chanting of their holy names. All the activities of Sri Nityananda and Sri Chaitanya were corroborated by the behavior of Acharya Sri Advaita Prabhu. Since from the impersonal point of view, the words of Sri Advaita Prabhu were not in accordance with the practice of relishing the holy names, all aspects of Achintya Bheda have been glorified in the teachings of Sri Chaitanya. The activities unfavorable to Sad Achar, Achar means behavior, Sad means proper behavior, engaged in by Jagadish, Balaram, and Sarup, who gave up behavior favorable to such preaching while identifying themselves as Advaita Acharya's sons, are totally unfavorable to the activities of Chaitanya and Nityananda. So again, here he's pointing out the history of three of the sons of Advaita Acharya who actually were inclined towards the impersonal conception and misinterpreted Advaita Acharya's teachings to represent that. And that carried on. I mean, this is mentioned by Vrindavan Das in this Chaitanya Bhagavata in other places as well. And it was pervading in Bengal, in Shantipur, and many places. And still in the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Prabhupada, very prominent influence. And so he's speaking directly to that. Right? The behavior of Krishna and Gopal was simply contemporary imitation of Advaita's relishment of the holy names. Since Srimad Achyutacharya followed the behavior of Sri Gadadhar Pandit, his position as an Acharya is fully respected. So even the other two sons, Krishna and Gopal, they were imitating the activities of Advaita, but they were not following in the deeper teachings and the deeper moods of the real followers of Mahaprabhu, headed by Gadadhar Pandit. Achyuta, the most prominent son of Advaita, was a disciple and follower of Gadadhar Pandit. And therefore, he is fully respected, and his name comes up in many, many places in very beautiful and favorable ways in Chaitanya Bhagavata and Chaitanya Charitamrita. When forgetfulness of the behavior of Sri Advaita Prabhu, who was the acharya in relishing his own holy names, became prominent among persons who identified themselves as his followers, Srinivas Acharya was established as the acharya of the Sri Gaudiya Vaishnavas. The manifestations and incarnations of the acharyas belonging to the category of worshipable objects have entrusted all of Sri Gaura Nityananda's activities in the acharyas belonging to the category of worshippers. Although the preaching of kirtan mixed with the mood of opulence in the areas surrounding Mumbai by Namadeva Acharya, who followed the principles of Lakshmidhar, the author of Nama Kaumudi, was not fully accepted by Vittalacharya, the world of Gaudiya Vaishnavas achieved the pastimes of relishing the holy names with the Nama Kirtan propagated by Acharya Srinivas. So he's alluding here to different subtle expressions that were a little different than the way Mahaprabhu's Gaudiya Vaishnavas were experiencing and teaching. Remember, Mahaprabhu, although his followers were, one speciality is that he had his followers were, among them were devotees of all of his different incarnations. And so some of his followers obviously were worshiping him in the mood of Sitaram or Lakshmi Narayan, etc. So in some of them, their kirtan had the mood of opulence, right? But amongst the, what would we say, the complete followers, like Vittalacharya, who was the son of Vallabhacharya, but he was very close with Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, and they were following this mood of kirtan in the intimacy of the moods of Braj Prem, right? Not influenced by the opulent features of the Lord, although opulence is included in Madhurya. Madhurya overcomes the concepts of opulence and makes that Nam Kirtan very, very sweet and makes one who is chanting in that mood or aspiring for that mood eligible for Braj, right? The world of Gaudiya Vaishnavas achieved the pastimes of relishing the holy names with the Nama Kirtan propagated by Acharya Srinivas. The pastimes of preaching the chanting of the holy names in the footsteps of the Acharyas who relished the chanting of their, capital T, own names by Acharyas who relish the chanting of the Lord's names are proper examples of accepting, without attack, the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda. Bringing up Achintya Bheda Bheda means that these other conceptions can be accommodated, but they may not be prominent, because the absolute truth can accommodate all these different facets and means of worshiping the Lord. But what Mahaprabhu came to teach and propagate was the most subtle, most divine, most sweet mood of love of the inhabitants of Braj, without dismissing or even minimizing the worship of those who want to be devotees of Sitaram or Lakshmi Narayan. The pastimes of relishing the Lord's holy names are established in the current of pure devotional service found in those who are fully prepared to act for the pleasure of Nityananda and Chaitanya. The phrase Nija Nam refers to the holy names of Krishna. Those names of Krishna, non-different from the person Krishna, that preacher of Krishna Nam Sankirtan, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Dev, who in the form of congregational chanter of the holy names revealed the all-attractiveness of Krishna's worship, that Nityananda, who as Gaudiya Namacharya preached the teachings of Sri Chaitanya in Navadvip door to door with Sri Haridas, who relished the chanting of Nijanam, let these acharyas, who relished the chanting of their own names, be eternally glorified. Let us repeatedly glorify the acharyas who relished the chanting of their, that means Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya, their own names, who displayed expertise in proper behavior by the establishment of Sri Nityananda's Namahata in Sri Godrumadweep, a particular village of ancient Navadvip. So that Acharya, who is that Acharya? That Acharya is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He established his place of bhajan, his place of worship and writing and teaching and everything in Godrum, and he identified it as the place of Nityananda Prabhu's Namahata, the marketplace of the holy name. And so, now Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada quotes something written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Narya Godume Nityananda Mahajan Patiyache Namahata Jivera Karan. In the land of Nadia, on the island of Godrum, the magnanimous Lord Nityananda has opened up a marketplace of the holy names, meant for the deliverance of all fallen souls. As a result of the preaching of Nityananda's Namhata in Sri Godrum, the topics of offenseless chanting of the Lord's holy names have been preached in the current world of so-called Gaudiyas. And by the vibration of that Nijanam, the indirect names, Gonanam, are rejected. And the avidvadruti of sounds is totally checked. Gonanam are those names that relate to the form of the Lord in terms of functions in this material world, right? Like the functions of Mahavishnu and overseeing the material realm. And avidvadruti are these names of persons with no transcendental realization of the holy name at all, who think that it is just a means, temporary means for chanting, for purification, for focus of the material mind, so that ultimately you can give up any connection with the material world and merge into the impersonal Brahman, right? So none of these names chanted for, and when I say Gonanam, names chanted in relation to the Lord of this material universe, that means people that are chanting those names for material benefit. So either those who are chanting for impersonal aspiration or goals, impersonal goals, or those who are chanting the names of the Lord for material prosperity. These are rejected. By the influence of Sri Nityananda's establishment of Namhata, the devotees headed by Sri Advaita distributed the ecstatic holy names at the ghats of Nadia. Let those persons who properly follow the process of chanting the holy names, which is the purport of Achinta Bheda Bheda Vedanta, be glorified. Right, so understand Achintya Bheda Bheda appropriately. That this idea of simultaneously one and different helps us understand the Lord in completeness, right? That helps us understand God in his supreme abode, right? In his highest and original manifestation, right? It helps us understand that same Lord in all of his various incarnations that may demonstrate or manifest different specific qualities of that Lord in order to accommodate different devotees with different moods of worship. It also includes the understanding that that Lord is the creator and overseer of this material universe, and it also includes the concept that that Lord is also the source of that eternal Brahmajyoti, impersonal Brahman. All of these different aspects of truth are accommodated. In the Jaiva Dharma, when Babaji Maharaj is explaining to Brajanath different conceptions of the absolute truth in his Dashamula Tattva, Brajanath says, well, I can understand each of these topics that you're discussing. Why is it called achintya? And Babaji Maharaj says, these topics are not as difficult to understand individually, but how they can be reconciled together and how they harmoniously coexist, that is very difficult to understand. That's when material logic interferes. And it's very difficult to accommodate that because taken individually, okay, I can understand this concept and that concept, but when I try to reconcile them and put them together, then it becomes very, very difficult. So then the two brothers go on and say, Jaya Jaya Jagannatha Mishranandan, Jaya Jaya Nityananda Chaitanya Sharan. All glories to Jagannath Mishra's son, all glories to Nityananda, who is fully surrendered to Lord Chaitanya. Jaya Jaya Shachiputra Karunara Sindhu, Jaya Jaya Nityananda Chaitanya Rabandhu. All glories to Shachi's son, who is an ocean of mercy. All glories to Nityananda, who is Lord Chaitanya's friend. See how they're chanting continually both names, the two brothers, and revealing in those their relationship. Right? That's important. That's a very important thing, that you can't divorce Mahaprabhu from Nityananda, Nityananda from Mahaprabhu. They are non-different in so many ways, interdependent. Right? So there's going to be more prayers here, and also more purport in those prayers, which need some time to break down. So we're going to stop here and continue again tomorrow. Okay? And we offer obeisance to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Gurudev, all the Vaishnavas. Pray for the mercy of all the great devotees of the Lord, to Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Sri Chaitanya Dev, and their representatives in the form of our acharyas and the followers of our acharyas. Gaur Premanand.